Well, sometimes depends on the intention of the activity, but definitely it's a mixture. I would say that more than only one, it's a mixture of some methods or even theories. My approach is based on the communicative way in which students can be producing and not necessarily a perfect English or perfect specific accent, but through the implementation of different methods, for example, traditional ones such as the direct method, sometimes translation, grammar translation, or sometimes in a more considerable way of the holistic humanity of the student. So the humanistic approaches, which could be Suggestopedia, community learning, and even sometimes that a physical response. So all of those methods make my approach, which is based on the communication, but definitely I would say that it's an eclectic methodology that I use in my classes.
What I have found useful and has given me good results regarding second language teaching has been mainly communicative approach and the theories of second language acquisition by Stephen Krashen.
Well, basically, I cannot say that I have a specific method or theory that I use, as we try to be kind of eclectic on serving ourselves from different methodologies and methods and approaches. Definitely, I center myself on the communicative approach, and based on that, use like task-based approach. I also use a like a ESP when it is required. So it clearly depends on the population we are working with. But for me, the most important is a meaningful learning. Well, my favorite way to sequence a whole class, well, I don't have a specific one, but I try to start by warming up, by activating prior knowledge, by asking my students how they feel the day the class is running, also by like making like a review of the previous class or the previous topic that we studied, or by a game. So by games or by questions, by group activities. So like a warm up. After that, depending on the class, I introduce a topic or I present a part of vocabulary. So, but it varies. Of course, I have a lesson plan. So I try to follow the PPP methodology, but that is my favorite one. So we're math, presentation, production, and practice and production. So, but I try to use that methodology.
I would say my favorite way to sequence the class is using PPP, which is presentation, practice, and production.
My favorite way to sequence a whole class, most of the time, I would say is a deductive way. But my favorite way would be a combination or a variation of not always doing the same in the same order. I know I understand some of the lessons require a warming up, an explanation, and of course an assessment. But I like to implement it in different moments and in different ways, not to have a repetition of the same routines.
I would say regarding the social factors, mainly that some students haven't received good education in general, so for them it's harder to read, even in Spanish. So that's, I would say, a hardship to learn another language. And other thing that sometimes makes difficult teaching or learning by students is the the affective filter, because well, if you have a lot of anxiety, it's gonna be harder to understand even anything, even languages or math, whatever. It's gonna be harder to understand. So I try to keep the affective filter very low.
Well, talking about social emotional aspects that can affect or influence accomplishing the objectives of a course regard mainly to motivation and to find the way and the reason they are facing the course or the class in which they are beginning. Also, pressure of the group, this social pressure affects a lot in terms of the shyness or how outgoing the student can be, so that can prevent of making presentations in public, for example. But I also try not to generalize because each student is an individual world full of emotions and feelings. So it would be like recommended to try to tackle sometimes the difficulties by asking students simply how they are feeling. Sometimes we forget that in our classes as teachers.
Well, about the second question, what social emotional things um, have prevented me from meeting the objectives of my class? Well, so not now that we are working in like regular classrooms or face-to-face interaction, so I haven't like faced or tracked any difficulty. So I remember when we were in that lockdown period during the pandemic, so that there were like different situations, like economic problems from my students, or maybe that they were suffering from anxiety and depression, and the others when we have like the national strike. Those factors absolutely affected the way the classes were completely developed. So I have to stop the classes in order to give them time to speak, time to talk about it, time to reflect upon. So, but I think that it was not something negative, as I had the opportunity to feel and to know what the perspective was. But I think that we like covered all the objectives in a different way, but it helped a lot. I realized or I noticed that my students comprehended the proposed topic by the means of a practice. So I allow them to practice a lot by using different resources, uh, tangible, non-tangible resources, online resources, digital resources. So another way is like assigning like tasks and things that they can do, like can make them to use the topic started in something that is meaningful and something that is more practical than just like filling the gaps. And definitely sometimes I opt to having them presenting some quizzes and asking every single day if they have some questions.
I know that they have understood the topic by the production part, because I think if they haven't understood the topic, then it's gonna be harder to produce authentic material in the language, and that's it.
A good way to notice that my students are comprehending the topics is by asking sometimes questions to students and to ask students to recapitulate to each other what they have understood. Also, by making a checklist of knowledge and also sometimes accomplishing with the assignments makes a student to be more, let's say, aware of his or her own process. So that helps on the comprehension and assessment, not understood as a completion of paper tests, but as a way of forming. Assessment can be an excellent way to make students show what they know or what they miss to know. Instructional design, the way that you can plan the activity specifically in directions, timing, that is really difficult to make sure that all the students in a group, or even if it is a small group, to make sure that everyone understands what they have to do.
To me, the most difficult part when planning a lesson, well, no, I think that there is not a difficult part. So what it is important here is like to plan a wide variety of possibilities to learn, to approach the learning. So, but I don't think that that is difficult, and that is something that we do on daily basis. So that is not troublesome indeed.
The most difficult part for me, it's, I would say, in general, creating material that engage students, taking into account uh, their social context and their own ideas, their own way to see the world. Because I think if you teach taking into account the context of students, it's gonna be easier teaching. If you have a class of, I don't know, of engineers, then it's gonna be another way to see the world. They're gonna be interested in other topics, and if you engage them, if you take into account their lives, um, it's gonna be much easier to get a good class. But uh, it's that's a hard thing to do because everybody's so different. Um, well, that's it. Thanks.